Thinking about the link between food imports and the consumption challenges? Wondering if we could measure the gap utilizing advances in finance, food, health, and technology? Pause, think about it with intentional thought, and consider where we go from here. Stay tuned and hear what Maxim P. Weithers, you remember that name now, that's a special name, what he got to say about the supply chain solutions to develop new and improved experiences.
Something to think about with Dale Happy Knowles. What we think, we become. What we radiate, we attract. What we imagine, we surely can achieve. Let's change the narrative, 242.
242, welcome to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. Join our co-sponsors DomDev Enterprises and Page Investments and our friends of Something to Think About in this discussion this evening. Post your questions, concerns, and let us know what you're thinking about, where you're from, how your day was going, whatever it is that makes you float your boat. We just want you to be a part of this conversation and to have a lot of fun with us. So today we have, as I mentioned, Mr. Maxim P. Weithers. And like I said, you got to remember that name because that name carries plenty power and plenty energy. You know, and mind. Don't mind me, but the mind. We can talk a little bit about that too today. And so, welcome, Maxim. How are you?
I'm good, Dale. Thanks for having me on.
Great, awesome. But Maxim, you know, you've never disconnected from us. At least I don't feel like you did. You were this keen-minded transient schoolmate of mine back in the days of roaming the corridors of QC and standing up underneath the steps, waiting for the girls to go up and what have you. So, you know, we were kind of mischievous in our ways somehow, but we tend to make ourselves to be somewhat productive in the next 30, 40 years thereafter, right? And so we want to talk about how you have become so productive that you are actually changing the world as we go. You know, we hear a little bit on this little rock, but you out there in the big global world, and you're talking about some things. And so one of the things for me is that I focused only in baseball and Bob Marley in high school. And I know you were focused a lot on squash and, well, you know, I ain't going to say what you guys was focused on. You could say that if you want to say it. But, you know, you got sand between your toes, as we say in the Bahamas. But you had to leave, I think, at early age, about 14 or 15, because I don't think you were able to finish with us. Correct?
That's correct. 14, I left.
14. Mm-hmm. But that passion for squash didn't end there. And so when you went off to Canada, you pursued that. And tell us a little bit about how that journey went.
Right. So, of course, I started playing at the Village Club, which is now the Four Walls. And my uncle had taught me Keith Parker, who's the national track and field coach. And I went off to Canada and played in the junior circuit, and got to the finals of the Canadian Junior Championship. I'm getting some feedback here.
Yeah, maybe
So-
one of your things you gotta turn off one of your sounds. Let me see. Which one are you speaking into the mic on? Yeah. Let's see which one is your video. Probably where your video is. No, that's muted.
Okay, how about that?
Yeah. Yeah, sound clear.
Okay, oh, that's better. Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can. Loud and clear.
Okay, that's better. So yeah, I went off to Canada, got to the finals of the Canadian Juniors, and that was the first year after I left Nassau. And that same year, they sent us off to Sweden for the World Junior Championships. I got crushed. I went with a couple other fellas from Nassau and Freeport, and it was a long trip. I learned a lot, met some amazing people, a lot of people that I reconnected with in Canada. I think I was fortunate enough to meet up with people in Sweden who I stayed in touch with throughout my squash career. So after that experience, meeting all the juniors from around the world, I realized one thing, that squash connected everyone from all parts of the world, and I really love traveling. Traveling, as we know, is one of the best educational tools out there, right? So I really enjoyed that. Got back to Canada, and then just continued to get lessons. I had a tough, schedule. 6 o'clock in the morning, I was up, heading off to the squash courts at 7 a.m. Training for an hour, hopping on a train and subway, bus, and getting back to school for 9 o'clock. School until 3:15. Hop back on a train and bus and head back to the squash courts in the afternoon. And so that was my schedule for a good while. I got better and better and better, and eventually I won the Canadian Junior Championships. And that year they said, well, let's send this guy over to Europe, and London was the place where all the top players sort of congregated. All the Khans and Australians and New Zealand, all the people that were anything to do with squash. So I actually signed a racket deal and a coaching deal with the World Squash Champions coach. His name is Ramat Khan, from Pakistan. And I basically lived with them and trained with them for the first year for 5 months. And that was horrible. I was London between November and May. So anyone who's been to England during those months, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's just slush and cold and nasty. So it's so far away from typical weekends on Paradise Island. So, and jumping on the boat and going spearfishing and that kind of thing. So, but again, learned so much. My first day on the court with these guys, I spent like 3 hours with my coach, went through everything I needed to know. And then just daily routine, 6 days a week, 1 day break, just playing with all the top pros, just getting my butt crushed, really. I was really late to the game, right? Most of these guys had started playing when they were between 7 and 10.
Right.
And I picked up a racket when I was 10, but I didn't really play tournaments till I was 13, 14. And that's when I got more excited about the game. So,
so he would have, I think you would have said to me before that he would have introduced you to a process that gives us the advantage of being elite athletes to be the elite athlete versus the wannabes, the pretenders, the contenders, as some of us who like to talk, who might have a lot of talent, can achieve. But you all are able to achieve great heights because I think it was him who introduced you to the mind process.
Yeah, well, at the time, the fellow that he was training with was his younger cousin, Jahangir Khan. And Jahangir totaled 5 years unbeaten. So it's one of the longest winning streaks in sports history, next to guys like Edwin Moses, who was, I think, similar to that kind of record. But yeah, you do. I mean, anyone today can go and train, get the physical aspects, strength training, get techniques down with good coaching and video and film and that kind of stuff. But the mental game is really where the winners distinguish themselves. It's the same in business. It's the same with, I think, everything in life that I've discovered so far. And fortunately, I really worked my ass off in the last years of the junior program in Canada to win those national championships. And I think that's probably why they sent me off. But that's one of the things I think everyone needs to look at, including companies business owners, athletes, that's where they separate themselves. They think differently. They have different beliefs, and those beliefs, stem to different emotions. Those emotions create habits and actions,
Yeah.
and those actions what gives you the results, right? So I know you're a big fan of the whole process, and there's a whole bunch of things mixed up with that gratitude and visualization, um, breathing techniques that we're getting really into, uh, learning how to breathe. Most people breathe very shallow, which
Right.
doesn't get enough oxygen into the brain or the muscles, especially during an intense
Heated, right.
activity. So that whole process became very interesting to me, but I didn't really get so much into it until the mid 2000s, and I think that's when The Secret came out. I don't know if anyone's seen The Secret, the movie, or
Yeah. I didn't see it, but I'm aware of it.
yeah. So the Secret, made people more aware of what was possible with proper mindset,
Right.
right? And when I saw it, it was actually a video that was given to me by a friend of mine in Toronto, and he said, "You got to look at this." He gave it to me, like, I think in November, one year, and I put it on the shelf. To be honest, I didn't even look at it. He said, "You got to make sure you look at it." And I saw him again at Christmas and New Year. He said, "Did you look at the video?" I said, "No, not yet." Eventually looked at it in January, and things started to unfold. It was very, very weird and interesting at the same time. But my life started to change, and I started to recognize patterns and things that I'd done as a junior. And after winning a couple national championships in the States and Canada, 3 Caribbean championships, I sort of flashed back, and I could see those patterns, and what they were talking about in the video was pretty accurate. Now, a lot of people, that have seen the movie, they'll refer to it as like, the main message was the law of attraction, right? And the guy who was the main host, name was Bob Proctor. He passed away last year, but I thought he was American. But oddly enough, he lived about 20 minutes from me in Toronto. so, so he lived up in Markham, and I lived in the West End of Toronto. So it was weird to almost to the day, like 1 year to the day that I saw the video. I was standing in front of him, in a hotel room with a bunch of other people, and I'd met him through another friend at an event that I'd gone to, and they invited me to this event, and his wife was there, and she said, "Hey, you guys want to meet Bob?" Of course, we were crazy, and everyone agreed, and from there it went from strength to strength. And I think one of the things and the patterns that I recognize is surrounding myself with people that were bigger than me, that were smarter than me. Some of you might have heard this: if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, right?
Yep. I totally
So you have to surround yourself with bigger people, better people, smarter people. I want to be the dumbest person in the room all the time if I'm going into a group, because that's the only way you're really going to learn, right? And of course, all that stuff, all the osmosis starts to kick in, and you learn, you pick up different things from each person, and that's how we grow. That's how we grow personally. That's how we grow financially. That's how we grow on every level. So
yeah. So in the Bahamas, we like to be the most athletic or what have you, but we don't focus too much on the mental side in our training programs, whether it's on the job. They want to teach the syntax of how to do a job, but not to do all these different stuff. So what we wanted to highlight here was this journey on basically creates habits. And like you said, that the habits actually become subconscious in my mindset, that you will become a pro at it, and it just happens more so by instinct than anything else. And so David Schwartz, the author of The Magic of Thinking Big, says that success, and I'm paraphrasing a good portion and putting it in maybe my words or some other people's words, but success is 98% attitude and 2% mechanics. But you take this to another level because you say that success is beliefs plus habits minus distractions. And so they are all intangibles. And so there's really the mind, from what you're saying, could achieve whatever we wanted to achieve. And that's going to be important to the solutions that you're going to offer, because we're going to need mind power in order to make the adjustment. So you have any comment on that before we dive into some of the other stuff on the actual food chain?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll answer the first part of the question first, because there's different aspects of what I call awareness, right? There's 4 levels of awareness, right? And the first level, basically, everybody is part of this level, is you don't know what you don't know, right? So you can think of any part of your life, and there's something you don't know about something. So therefore, it's easy to find a coach to clue you in on that aspect. But eventually, what you want to get to is the 4th level, which is an automation, right, of actions. And those automations are the habits that are part of the subconscious or unconscious mind. Unless you get to that level, you're basically going to be working too hard to allow the brain to do what it needs to do. So in terms of athletics, right, I'll take you through the 4 stages. So the first part is you don't know what you don't know. So you're unconsciously unaware of anything, basically. So it's called unconscious incompetence, right? The second level, right, you're aware there's something that you need to change, but you don't know what it is, right? And by the way, the brain uses about 20% of your whole entire energy supply, your blood supply. Your brain uses, it's only about 5 pounds of your body there, right? But it's using a very large amount of energy. So you've got this system going through where you know what you need to change, and you don't know what it is, right? But the third level is you know what you need to change, but it takes you a lot of effort to do it, right? Anyone listening in can think of something that they know they need to change. For example, eating habits, right? They know they shouldn't be eating KFC or junk food or chips in the middle of the night, but we're still doing it, right? We're still doing it because it's a habit, and so we know we're not supposed to do it, but that habit is ingrained in our beliefs that, it's just a little snack, it's not going to do much. But if you do that over 20, 30 years, it's gonna pile up, usually around the waist or wherever. So that's the third level, and that happens in a lot of sports, right? So we get, for example, a couple of weeks ago we had the Pan Am squash championships in Cartagena, which is where I'm based now, in Colombia, right on the coast, and I saw a lot of people losing very close matches. Wasn't because of fitness, wasn't because of strategy, wasn't because of technique. It's because up there they just didn't know what to do, or they couldn't do the right thing at the right time, right? And so in any sports, the actions, right? Well, we hear this term a lot, which is called, you've probably heard it, people referring to muscle memory. Right. But in general, muscles don't have memory, right? What happens is the brain triggers information through the nervous system to all your muscles and bones and joints, etc., right? So that has to happen instantly, and the only way that happens very, very fast is when it's automated, right? So the 4th level is what I mentioned earlier. Basically, you are automatically reacting to the circumstances, the required movement at the right time, all the time, every time, right? So let's say 100 meter sprint, like the girls and the Bahamas have been really doing well in track and field, but they can do better if they understood how this system worked, right? And so the 4th level basically is when you are aware of something, like think of something that you do every day automatically without really thinking, right? You get up in the morning, you brush your teeth, go to the washroom, make coffee, have breakfast, if you don't have breakfast, you're intermittent fasting. You'll go and exercise, right? I have my gratitude book, my gratitude journal here. I don't know if you can see it.
I can see it.
That I write everything in every morning. Sometimes I write it at night, but all those things are automatic habits, and you don't really think about doing them. They just happen because that's something that you believe in. People do things what they feel is important, right? So unless they feel it's important, then they won't really get to that stage. And so training is the same thing. If you're an athlete, you're training, right? You're going to go and train because you know that's important, because you know it's a part of getting that result. So that's the fourth level. And anyone in a sport that requires reactions, right? That the prefrontal cortex works at about 44 bits of information per second. That's the way it transfers information from your brain. So if you're thinking too much, it's too slow, basically, right? The subconscious or unconscious mind is moving things at millions and millions of bits per second. So there's really no comparison as to which part of the brain you should be training. And that's one of the things that I started specializing in after I got off the Pro Tour, because I realized that was really the major difference of how majority of people were becoming champions, becoming successful, and so forth. And so that's the first part of your question. The second part of your question was, how can we use this in day-to-day life? It's the same process, really. We need to learn how to tap into the subconscious, and so the segue really is, a lot of it has to do with proper nutrition, right? The way your brain functions is stemming
You're
from
just
the
making Madam Producer happy by saying that.
So if you're eating bad food, right, the nutrition that goes to your brain is going to be poor, and you're gonna have poor thoughts, and so it's all about, there's about 5 to 8 different levels of when we talk about that kind of stuff. Quality of food is key, right? The quality is going to depend on, a lot of it's going to depend on what you can afford and what's available, right? So there's a loop. It's a cycle, but I'll get back to that in a second. The quality of your sleep is also important, right? How we breathe, as I mentioned before, is very, very important. Your digestion, your absorption, your assimilation, which are different things, right? So absorption is, right, it's getting into the bloodstream, and then assimilation is going to the right parts of the body, right? We know now things like we didn't know even 5-10 years ago, which is, all the organs can speak to each other. They communicate. We never knew that before. And I was unaware of this until a few years myself. And then, as I mentioned, resting, our brain has to has a lot of cells that need to be dead cells that actually need to be dumped every night. And if you're not sleeping properly, that's not going to happen. So you lose a lot of quality sleep. And so there's so many aspects to the health portion of it that needs to be understood, right? So, one of the things that I did after I came off the Pro Tour, I started coaching and coached at a couple of universities in the summer junior squash programs at Princeton University and Dartmouth, and met some amazing people and learned a lot from them as well in terms of how these things coordinate and get integrated into your livelihood. And there was a mental coach there that was just unbelievable. We used to do like a name call, and there were like 50 kids, and he could remember all their names, and we're like, what the heck?
A monkey.
I mean, he just had he used techniques that he showed us later, but that was a few years back. So the whole idea of integrating proper nutrition is so key to proper performance. And we know that now because there's a lot of school programs in the Bahamas and all over the world now that are providing food for kids in the morning. There's a lot of schools that
Right.
don't. Their kids don't. They go to school without any food. It might be good maybe later on in life to do some intermittent fasting, which is something that I do. I don't eat breakfast, but I think for kids growing and for the brain of a child,
Right.
it's very important that they have proper meals, and that obviously results in proper thinking. They don't have to worry about that. Going to school hungry and all that kind of stuff, because they probably, if, depending on what kind of condition they're in or which neighborhood they're from, they might not have had dinner.
Right.
So
Right.
breakfast might be something that's critical to thinking, right?
Yeah.
So
And some of them
those,
don't have sleep. Yeah.
yeah, and we'll take it to another level in a minute, but you know when you're concerned about certain things, right? The brain induces a hormone called cortisol, right? That's the fight or flight or faint reaction, and it creates all the fears basically that most humans have, and that's one thing we need to learn to stop producing, right? It's important at some points, of course, if you're being attacked but the problem is we have this brain that's 200,000 years old and an environment which is 2,000 years advanced, right? 2,000 years ago, right? If we went out into the field without any help, right? We could get killed by a saber-toothed tiger. That doesn't happen anymore. But yet still people are afraid to do things by themselves, right? Because we're still thinking that could happen subconsciously, right? On a really deep evolutional psychology sort of kind of pattern.
Yeah,
It
but
still exists.
I say that's not the brain's fault. That's our fault for not updating us the software and the data on the software that we should
Yeah.
be putting in there, right?
Well,
Yeah.
part of the problem is they're not teaching this in school, right? It's not something that they teach. What we're learning mostly in school is how to memorize things,
Right.
right? Memorize this for that test. There are some schools that are recognizing these issues now, that thinking is more than just getting a top score for memorizing,
No, you have to
how
get
to do
A's
this
in
or how
those
to do that.
schools. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, those letters not on the alphabet, but I used to get. So tell us though, when we look at all of this, if we look at this food chain that you were talking about, because this is important. You travel a lot, as you mentioned in your athletic career, etc., and being a coach now of businessmen and more athletes actually yourself. You get to see a lot of poverty, and you get to see kind of things happening. So you can say that we import in the Bahamas 90% of our foods come from imports, and that's about $1 billion. I'm understanding from the I think it's the United States page. Madam Producer, you could probably put on the bottom of the screen with the page sources. I'm drawing a blank on that, but so we're talking about 90% of our foods is imported, and out of $1 billion that we probably pay for that. Now, when we look at all of that, and we know that the Bahamians are suffering from hypertension, diabetes, obesity. We've had from ministers of health and stuff talking about sugar taxes and stuff to try and get our diet cleaned up, because we're heavy on the peas and rice, macaroni and cheese, 6 pieces of chicken, all them different things. So when we look at that food that is coming in, and during the COVID in particular, a lot of the food, particularly the vegetables, they've lost all of its nutrients for all the lack of better words of saying it. So we want to get to the point where we're going to talk about your solution to that. But when we look at those things, how does all of that correlate in terms of why you would have wanted to develop the solution that you did?
Yeah, well, that's a bunch of interesting statistics, Dale, and the way I got into this was the furthest from really looking at saving the world from hunger. Believe me, after I got out of squash and got out of coaching, I actually got into advertising in Toronto, and because I coached long enough, and I thought, I need to do something different, and I wanted to learn something different, and I got into advertising, and I eventually got into online advertising, which is way back in 2004. I was working with a company in Toronto that sold all that junk mail, the envelopes.
Okay.
That I don't know if you guys if you're familiar with that, but you get like 10 or 15 flyers inside of an envelope, and it's all different companies, dentists and what have you, restaurants especially. And then they went bankrupt because our competitors, right, got bought out by one of the biggest newspapers in the city, and so their shipping, right, went from 3 cents per flyer to zero, because they were just stuffing them in the Saturday morning newspaper. So literally within 2 or 3 months, the company that I worked for went bankrupt. But it was interesting because it was a one-stop shop. They had the design, right? They had the sales, they had the printing and the shipping all under one roof. So I got to see everything again. I found myself in this environment, which is where I learned all of the advertising tools, and so that I immediately pivoted. I went to digital. I didn't know how to build a website or anything, but I found a guy who could do it, and we built this coupon website, right? And one of the squash clubs that I coached at, just so happened that Burger King was upstairs in the office building. This is completely so ironic, but so those guys the executives used to come down every day at lunchtime, play squash, and then I started pitching them this idea. I said, I've come up with this coupon website. Would you guys want to be a sponsor? So they were like, yeah. So they sent me a flyer. They designed it themselves. They put in the dimensions that I needed for the website, and we launched it. And then they asked me to build like they didn't actually have a website presence in Canada at the time. So we did that for them. So we built that first website presence. It wasn't really a website. It was just a page, really. It was very basic, but they didn't have anything else out there. So, and we integrated the coupon in that web page. They started getting sales. Like they started recognizing. They were looking at text messaging and all sorts of other stuff. I remember back in those days, they were trying everything to get more information. But the coupon thing started to work. Of course, today it's at a totally different level. But jumping forward a few more years, like that's one of the things that we need to teach the public is how to shop, right? Where to go to get certain things, what to buy, when to buy them. All those things were, wasn't really available back in 2004, and now technology's changed. We've got the ability to do things that we couldn't do years ago, and that's where my passion really lies. Is the amount of food that's being wasted in the States. I think it's something like $176 billion worth of food every year. That's insane. And not only is that horribly wrong, it's preventable, right? When I got out of squash and started coaching players, it was something that I became very passionate about. But then I realized, we need to coach people on basic things. And when the pandemic hit, right, that's really, and to be honest, I built a coupon website. Like, we developed it even further from the Burger King days. But what I didn't realize before was that, when we had a lockdown here, we were almost 6 months, consecutive months, forced to stay at home. So we could only go out once every 10 days, and we were only allowed to go out on days based on our national ID. So it was very, very interesting that I discovered probably the last bit of information, which was, it wasn't only about selling more stuff, right, from restaurants and grocery stores. It was more, the whole supply chain was messed up, right? We had, for example, people that were moving fresh fish in a cube van from one city to from Barranquilla, which is like an hour away from here, and they went from here. They were going from there to here, and in between, some villagers were just, they stopped the truck. It was a refrigerated truck. They stopped it, turned it over, and literally peeled it open with crowbars and stuff, right? Wow. 20, 30 guys. They didn't want to hurt anyone. There were two cops videotaping, and the owner of the truck standing there helplessly. But these guys just really wanted to feed their families. Remember, most of these people, along the coast where I live, they live day to day or week to week. Most of them don't have even refrigerators, right? Because electricity is expensive for most people. And so they were peeling this truck just to get at the food, right? That was pretty sad for me to experience that. And yes, I was fortunate. I've traveled to over 55 countries now, playing squash in India and China and all these places. And you see a lot, you learn a lot from traveling. And hopefully I can take some of those experiences that I've learned and, put them into something useful that can help lots of people, millions, billions, it doesn't matter. Even if it helps one family, it's going to be important, because that kind of experience, seeing people rip apart a metal cube van for some food, that's, even today, it's still really powerful, right? So that piece of information led to me realizing the entire food chain was needed to be looked at, and I really wouldn't have it wouldn't have clicked unless we had the pandemic, unless we had the lockdown, unless I was able to see, the farm, the transportation, right, what I call the retail section, and the home. Those are the four sections that in that diagram you just threw up there, right? The food section, or the retail section, right? It's basically, I split that up. There's two options there, or two segues. One is restaurants. It's the third one from the right. I call it retail. Retail is grocery stores and restaurants. I put that under one heading under retail. But basically, I wouldn't have connected this little diagram without the pandemic. Right. So it was really critical part of the puzzle that I was missing. So it's I'm grateful for everything that happens, good or bad. We have to find what is good from it and use it, and what's bad from it and just disregard it.
So if we look at that model that you have there and translate that to the Bahamas, because you talk about I forget how many millions of food you say was wasted. So in the Bahamas, if we model the two countries, because we always say that when the United States sneeze, the Bahamas catch the cold. That's how much we mimic everything that's happening over there. So let's just assume that the model is the same, and if we apply it to the Bahamas, that would mean that if 80% of the imports are wasted, based on what you have on the slide here, just using home and retail, I think that's about 80%.
That's correct.
Scenario. So that 80% is about 720 million, or 6% of our GDP, right? And so if we articulate that, the inefficiencies, the impact of that wastage to the Bahamas and being able to sustain our economies would be similar to what you would experience there with the trucks, but not as dire situation as what is happening there. Maybe some people here, but not a gigantic percentage. But it still could happen, particularly if you have another shutdown based on some viral attack or whatever. It caused the borders to shut down, because if we get 90% of our food is coming from foreign, then that's a problem. So if we look at that, then how then do we use this knowledge to be able to affect better experiences?
Right. So yeah. So I'll address what you're looking at here on the diagram.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It starts off at 12 o'clock. So at the very top, the red circle there. So $176 billion worth of food. These statistics come mainly from the States, but
right.
As you said, it correlates very, very similar to the Bahamas because of the proximity of the islands to the mainland.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we learned was that a lot of the wastage actually happens at home, right? So for example, if you've ever had any food that was stuck in the back of the fridge for a couple of weeks, and you go to open it, like I had a sandwich on wrap the other day, and I don't know, it got stuck in the back corner, and I didn't realize it was there. I went to open it. I was like, "What's this? What's this thing in the back there?" I'm like, "Well, that thing was full of fungus. I mean, nobody, as soon as you open it, you're like, that's garbage."
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? That goes in the garbage. That goes in the waste. When we were growing up, we weren't allowed to leave food on the table, like on the plate, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you left food on the plate, you're gonna get a little cut ass. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So sorry if I don't want to override my language here, but excuse my French. But yeah, so that's a big issue, and part of the issue is we don't have any tools that can monitor these kind of situations, right? Mm-hmm. And this is something that we're in the middle of developing right now, and so that's the biggest issue, and part of that issue, it all revolves around habits, right? Habits, and we just don't have any kind of structure when it comes to buying food, keeping food, and monitoring what we have in the fridge.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the biggest problem. Some of the statistics also show like $1,600 worth of food gets wasted every year on just on food, right? And that's per family, right, in the United States. So I mean, $1,600 is not a lot of money, but it's not a little bit of money either. Right. That's something that can be used towards electricity, right, gas, right, gifts, and fun thing, insurance, health insurance, right, clean water. That's a substantial amount of money that can be put towards something useful for your family, right? And then, of course, the next level is the restaurants and grocery stores. Now, I sent you an article. There's a company called A-Fresh out of the United States that got $115 million investment in their app, right? And their app was basically an iPad that addresses the grocery store chains and helps them to order in a much more efficient way. Yeah. So what their app does basically, if you don't have the food on the shelf, right, as a grocery store business, right, you don't make the sale. If you have too much, it can go to waste. The spoilage will occur, and then you lose money on that end. So, but if government and VCs are investing that kind of money, it tells you a couple of things, right? One, it tells you this has become a very serious issue, right? Government's being involved, and venture capitalists are putting money into this because it is an important part of our livelihood, and we all learned how important fresh food was during the pandemic, right? Nobody wanted to eat canned stuff, and because we know, we talked about, you mentioned this earlier, is sugar and the sugar taxes. That's happening everywhere. That's happening all over the world. Companies or countries are actually putting taxes on products that have too much percentage of sugar in their products, because that creates a lot of inflammation in the brain, and that causes a lot of those diseases that you mentioned is caused by side effects from excess sugar. All those things that you mentioned, diabetes, high blood pressure, right? But I think with this sort of understanding, we can start to curtail how people behave at home, their buying habits. And I teach this to some of the students that I work with, is they learn, right, how to shop properly. Reading the ingredients is a very simple thing. People don't care anymore. The food companies have been amazing at their sales approach, which is all neuroscience based, right? They know what triggers people to buy things, right? For example, there's a book all on how the companies created the perfect crunch for potato chips or Doritos. I'm not kidding you. Even so far as going down to the color, and anyone who's watched The Founder, which is the Burger King story, the McDonald's story, they had to fry the chips at a certain temperature for a certain amount of time to get that perfect crunch. But now we know there's a lot of other stuff. There's a lot of other ingredients that hook people into the food besides those things.
Right.
So then the whole experience, the transportation that goes to the from the farm, and then from the farm, So here's a question that I like to ask people when I talk about this is, when you buy something at the grocery store, do you have any idea how fresh it is?
No, not. We've had that discussion with some of the fruits and stuff, trying to figure out if it's soft, if it's firm, if you shake it, if you could hear the seed, if it's all that kind of stuff. But when I looked at some of the products that we were getting for the business that I was associated with, and how long that stuff was coming to the Bahamas then, and you add how long the fruits and stuff take, that meant that when those veggies got tables at the store, they were down to like 2% of their potency, or something small like that. So when it got to us on the table, you might as well say we was just eating junk. And that's why I said, in the title, where we are important, dumping on us, how we could get past that. And so your app that you were developing seemed to be something that would make that whole process more efficient, and particularly for us as a user to be able to improve our system.
Yeah, so the system really, it's not just one app. It's a combination of four or five different apps that all communicate with each other, right? The idea is that, right, when you have a farmer that ships a product, right, the first person that's going to get notified, right, usually is the grocery store, right? And the grocery store will say, okay, yes, you can bring it in such and such a date. It's scheduled for that date already, but they'll confirm that. And then the shippers will get notification as to when that can be shipped, or how who's going to ship it, right? How is it? What's the logistics on that product being shipped? Let's just say broccoli, for example, right? Or fruit. It doesn't matter. Any kind of fresh fruit or vegetables, and then, right, then it gets shipped to the grocery store. But when we go in, we never know how long it's been sitting there. Has it been there a day, 3 days, a week? right? So then we buy it and we get home, and sometimes it lasts a day, sometimes it lasts, right, a few days, sometimes it lasts a week.
Oh, an hour.
And there's all sorts of variables in there that we've actually been thinking about as well that can make those numbers change. But the whole idea is to have an app that can communicate from the time it leaves the farm right to right to the consumer.
Right.
So the consumer knows, okay, I've got stuff on my grocery list that's coming in today in this grocery store. Let me go get it before, while it's fresh and before anyone else goes and gets it, right? So now, I had lots of pushback. I even spoke to some farmers, poultry farmers, and that pushback was actually quite big. I think when Amazon started, right, they were only selling books, right, and they wanted to actually give the people an opportunity to tell everyone whether it's a good book or not, right? And they wanted to have the audience rate the book. Now the publishers basically said that's a dumb idea. We don't want people, because if they say it's a bad book, then sales are going to plummet. But they went ahead and did it anyway. Now, what do you see today, right? What do you see in any restaurant, in any hotel, right? In any customer service? There's a 5-star rating about the service of that place, right?
Right.
And it's only helped, and what's happened is it becomes social proof, right? Part of that whole ingredient. People want to know, hey, is this thing any good? Is that product any good? Is that service any good? Right? Is that book any good? Right? They want to know. So this will help in the same way. I mean, original pushback from maybe the grocery stores or the restaurants, but the consumers, I think, have a right to know, right? Because it's going to help them in acquiring the freshest quality food. There's a lot of companies out there saying, yeah, we sell fresh food, but consumers have never been told how fresh that word fresh means, right?
Yeah.
So
and that food, that measure then could be used also by activists, etc., to push back at the food chain people to say, hey, this is proof that you're bringing in and dumping garbage on us. You need to tighten up your process. But Jasmine Bain had a question just now, and welcome, Jasmine. If Madam Producer, you put it back up. It says reading the labels and say if something has low fat, it is probably loaded with sugar, and so forth. So it's a lot of trickeryism happening there with advertisements and stuff like that. So my question on that would be then is how then can we use the apps that you have as a suite to be able to help people know what is happening, and particularly from these things that's causing medical challenges for us, so that they could either avoid it, or because a lot of people don't know how to read a label, and some things are hidden, or just that we ignorant to it. You talked about the 4 levels earlier. Things you know, things you don't know, what you could do about it, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, because one of the ideas that I've been thinking about for a long time is that I don't understand why more businesses don't coach their tenants, right? Let's take, for example, let's take the McDonald's business concept, right? Everyone thinks McDonald's is a restaurant business. It's not a restaurant business, right? It sells restaurant food as a product, but the business where they make the money is they make the money because they own, right,
the franchise,
the piece of land that the franchise sits on, and then the food is sold to pay for that lease. McDonald's is the biggest landholder in the world. Yeah, they're the biggest rental agency in the world. Basically, they have the most amount of square footage being leased out to their customers, right? Now, what do? They see that system basically is they took a system which was selling food, right? They trained people to do it really well. They helped them, supported them to the audience around the restaurant so that they can pay the rent, right? So they supported the grassroots of their business once they understood what that business was, right? That's the key. So that should also happen for any kind of business, right? And what you do, Dale, is you've set up this amazing network. Really, all these different ideas and minds and people that are come together. We call that really a mastermind, right? So when you get 10 people thinking about one thing instead of just one or two people thinking about one thing, it's going to be an amazing amount of contribution, right? So I think the same thing needs to happen for food. If we have this kind of cycle, and we can see the complete cycle now, it's not just at the grocery store or the home or the transportation or the farm. We can see the complete cycle of the food. Then we can start understanding like what's happening where. And then we can educate people. We can easily put together chat groups or Facebook groups or Instagram groups and share that knowledge as to how to read labels. And you're absolutely right. People are, companies are hiding information. They're forced to put nutritional information on their labels, but then they write it so small that the people that buy the stuff can't read it. I mean, I have to walk around with a magnifying glass to see some of that stuff, right? And I'll give everyone like a freebie right here, which is basically there's a nutritionist in the States. Her name is JJ Virgin, so jjvirgin.com, and she has she discovered a few things that was happening in the food industry, and she used to run resort camps and stuff for weight loss and that kind of stuff, and then people would enjoy the whole weekend and they go home, and then after a week or two they would basically revert to their old habits, right? So that was what she discovered. Basically there were 4 or 5 things, actually six things that were making people go back. One was the habit. So we know, for example, habits take between 66 days to 90 days to maybe a year. It depends on the person. But those habits take a while to sink into, to actually grow the neurotransmitters and the neural pathways in your brain, right? And so what we know from JJ Virgin is that she found that people are reverting back to their old habits because they weren't having that stickability. They weren't sticking to the actions long enough, right, to create those habits. So if you go, this is, a lot of people do this. They go to these events, they get all wild and crazy, and everyone's excited for the weekend. They go home and they put whatever they bought on the shelf, and then they never read it again, right? Or they never do anything about it. Why? Because they need the accountability, right? We need people to be pushing us on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, right, to make sure those neurons and neural pathways grow. That's the habit, right? But what she found was there was a bunch of food that was causing a lot of problems in the gut, really. So the absorption factor, right? And the gut is basically, that's the strongest part of the body that helps us to recover from anything, right? That's our medication. That's everything that helps us to heal, right? And so I'll give you 6 of the things that she found that was causing something called leaky gut syndrome, right? One was sugar. So we all know about that. But sugar hides in a lot of stuff. So, for example, hides in ketchup, right?
Yeah.
Hides in mustard, hides in a lot of condiments. If you look at any packaged foods, packaged meats, like ham, hot dogs, all that kind of stuff, it's all hidden in there, right? And it might say sugar in different forms, sucrose, different maltodextrose, all those kind of things can mask what it really is. Then you've got corn, right? People think corn is healthy, but a lot of corn in the States has a lot of pesticides,
Right.
and all those sort of growth hormones and all those kind of things, right? And you've got peanuts, right? Peanuts, which isn't even a nut, it's a legume, right? So that's grown underground. So again, pesticides in the ground, all that stuff gets absorbed, right, into the peanut. So we've got to look at that. Now, if they're organic, right, that's going to be the best option.
Right.
Other things like milk, right? Milk is great, but it's milk is really made for a 2,000-pound baby calf, right? The human body doesn't actually have the capacity to digest, and that's why a lot of people are lactose intolerant. Because if they came from, look, Bahamas is the majority are African descent, right? Most people that are African descent don't have that capacity because we never needed, right? In Africa, we never really needed to drink cow's milk.
Right.
Right? It wasn't something that was maybe it wasn't even around or available, but we just don't have that capacity to break down all the sugars that are in the cow's milk. They probably in Africa, I would think maybe more different animals were farmed, maybe goats or stuff like that, right? And then what do we have? Other foods, gluten, right? We know, for example, a lot of the modern day problems that we have, conditions that you mentioned, didn't even start until we started farming wheat, right? And the problem is these things, they get into the stomach, they get into the stomach lining, and once they're in there, the body says, "Hey, this, we don't recognize this. This is this is an alien product. We need to get rid of it," right? And then once it crosses the blood barrier, it starts creating inflammation. That inflammation causes a whole bunch of havoc. That's called leaky gut syndrome, and that happens to a lot of people when they eat certain foods. So we have to really be aware. Just hop on JJ Virgin's. When I came to Colombia, I didn't know about anything about business. I didn't have any contacts or anything, and I got myself a business coach. And this was actually a friend of Bob Proctor's that I started working with, and I've been working with it ever since. So, it's important to. Fastest way to get to anything is find yourself a mentor. A lot of people lean on.
That's critical.
A lot of people, will lean on, podcasts like yours because there's so much knowledge. Like it's unbelievable amount of knowledge from all the guests you've had on. I've been following you for years now, and I appreciate what you've done. It's amazing work. There's a cost to everything, man. There's a cost to everything. That's the problem. But as long as we can help some people out there, that's the whole purpose of the apps is to, is to share the knowledge, make sure people know what they have. Could you imagine just having an app that told you what's in your fridge, where the freshest food is on your grocery list is, right? When the broccoli is going to go bad, when the strawberry is going to go bad, when anything is going to go bad, you have to use that as a priority, all right? Prioritize the list. So you have an inventory list at the farm, you have an inventory list at the grocery store. Why don't we have one at home?
Yeah, and you put all that together, and we're gonna tie that into our smart cities so that we could have that even more efficiently transmitted to each of us so that we could get the information properly. So Jasmine is here again, and she's saying that, oh, you changed it. She's a chef. I come in for dinner. And I have degrees in culinary arts and baking, pastries, and food services management, plus 2 certifications in food safety. I'm well-rounded and passionate about helping to educate. So, you could send us an email and we could look at your bio and everything, and the people who decide who comes on the show, maybe you would be one to come too and help educate us all on what's happening. And then you say, I'll be doing a master's degree in a few months. Wow, master's. And I struggle to hold on to the boat. In food, innovation, and technology. And that's great. We have to fix this country. We have a lot. Yes, you changed it. Madam Producer, you changed it. We have a lot of unhealthy people here in the Bahamas, and I concur with Mr. Maxim. Yes, and part of our unhealthiness is that we still at that first stage, or that 4 stages that you talked about earlier, Maxim, where we just don't know what we don't know. But Carla and Tina, my mind, I feel special today. So Tina says, Maxim, good seeing you both. Happy morning. Yes, and
Absolutely. Hi, Tina.
And Carla had something there just now. Change takes time. Mindset, consistency, the key components to creating change. And so that leads us right back into the question I have here, and we can celebrate the GMOs here. Elaborate on GMOs. Yes, we could do it in a second. So what in terms of that change, because we could develop all these apps and stuff like that, but that process that we go through as athletes, as to how to hit the baseball 400 feet and without thinking about it, or the curveball or the slider, and in your case you have squash, you have to create those habits. And you talk about 60 days to a month to a year just recently, and I always was taught that it was like 21 days. After 21 days of doing something, is a habit. But what do real life people, not super athletes and stuff like that, who might already have developed a level of skill of adapting, what do us common people, because I put myself back in the common people state these days, so I can't throw the ball more than 5 foot, so no more. So what do we have to do to adapt?
Right. So, the amount of time that we take to develop a habit used to be, so that whole 21-day thing came about from some research that they did years ago when they started the NASA programs. I'm not sure if it was NASA or whether the study was done in Russia. But what happened was they took the helmet of, this is my understanding, they took the helmet of one of the astronauts and they inverted it, so it was upside down, right? And it took the astronaut 21 days to adjust to doing his day-to-day routines, right? Even though he was seeing everything upside down, it took the brain a little while to adjust. And so they thought, okay, well, that's the answer then. But that wasn't really what was the answer. And we know that now because we can actually see neuron pathways growing for specific habits in the brain now, because with all the MRIs that we could do and all the brain mapping, right? That all that new technology, we can literally see, right, neurons growing. And we know, for example, they've done tests where they have put the brain mapping headsets on sprinters and say, look, I just want you to imagine running the 100 meters, right? Tell me when you start, tell me when you finish, and then go out and do it in real life, and exactly the same times, were happening, right? So they saw it in their mind, they went through the motions, and you can see which part of the brains were firing off, right? Was sending messages to specific muscles, but it was just happening in their mind. right? And so with that sort of technology, we can definitely understand it a lot better. So, again, when I say 66 days to 365 days, on the average, we just say like 90 days, 100 days, we can get you to adapt to any new habit. Basically, if you stick to the program, right, you don't jump off. It's like, you start going in one direction, and this comes back to my success formula. It's very simple. You start going in one direction, right? Beliefs, habits, good habits. You get distracted, right? What happens if you go back, right? It's like the analogy that I like to use is a plane, right? When you leave one city, right, you go up in the air, right? And so you've got thrust and direction. The distractions are, right, ear pockets. So you have ear pockets, you can go up and down, right? That slows you down. You can get wind distractions, which moves you from side to side, right? You get flock of seagulls or whatever kind of distractions there are. Distractions really is a metaphor for these things are holding you back, right? They're slowing you down, right? Stop doing them. Same thing for the brain. If you're trying to get a habit of eating better, right, the best way to eat better is to not have the food in your house. Right. That's going to distract you from your health. So people know what they are, they just don't do them, right? So we need accountability. We need people in a group that says, hey, let's see your shopping list. Right? Show us what you just bought, right? Everyone knows what they do right and wrong. It's just a matter of pushing past that third phase barrier so that they're automatically doing the right things all the time, right? It's hard. Yeah, it's not. We say it's simple, but it's not easy. It's not easy because the brain it's so outdated, right? That software needs to be updated, like you said, and having stuff like this available, having apps that are constantly telling you, reminding you, right? That's the way you build those neurons, is being constantly reminded on a daily basis. How do infants learn to speak? Right? How do they learn to speak a foreign language? They go to a new country, right? If they don't have a lesson, they don't there's no lessons.
Right.
Right? How do they learn? They watch the lips, the tongue, right? They listen and they repeat. Do this easily.
On that same point, I have a cousin, John Cox's son, and he learned to play the bass guitar, piano, etc., all those by himself because he was sort of a loner. School was saying he was not tuning into what they were doing, and so now he's almost like a maestro at those things, and then the other day we had some more people who were doing things that people wouldn't normally consider to be normal, and I think it's to do with focus, and you mentioned it right there that it's your belief. If you believe in this thing and you create the habits, and take away those distractions, then you're right on target to do all these different things. And then there's trauma, right? I mean, trauma could always send you spinning in the right direction or the wrong direction. But this has been great, and I think Carla out there made the comment a while ago, but she's a part of I call it a running club. I don't know why they want to run, because running is a waste thing for me. But maybe they could expand there to do and go now into each person's fridge, as you mentioned, to figure out what people are eating, not just what they actually performing when they run. But tell us, is there anything that we didn't cover that you would like to say to our audience today?
Yeah, well, let me answer Carla's question or comment that my mindset does take a bit of time. We know that now, but everyone on this planet has created a habit already, right? Even babies and infants, right? The habit of, for example, crying a certain way for food, crying a certain way for babies are only afraid of two things when they're born. I don't know if most people don't know this, but They're afraid of loud noises and falling, right? That's it. Every other fear we know about there's about 50 of them. That's what holds us back.
So
Every other fear,
they
the
learn
other
first then.
we learn fear, and that's what stops us. That's the major distraction, right? We're afraid of winning. We're afraid of losing. We're afraid of being embarrassed. We're afraid of.
Sound like LeBron James. No, sorry, I didn't say that. Go ahead. Go ahead. You go ahead.
But it's not the fear that's important. It's how we handle the fear, right? So that's I think that's one of the most important factors is we need to feel the fear and do it anyway. We need to realize it's going to happen. If we don't do it, we'll never know. The biggest thing they've said that people have regrets for. It's not the things that they didn't do. The things that they did is the things that they didn't do, right? So if you tried and you failed, at least you tried, right? Maybe someone else could pick up the loose parts and run with it. But I think Bahamas has a great opportunity. I mean, we have a lot of things that we can do there. Like 200 years ago, 500 years ago, when there wasn't any imports or anything like that, right? We had to live off the land, right? Fish, land, whatever was there. And a lot of people are moving back to that. Simplicity, very simple, basic things. I've even talked about, taking old, for example, containers, building vertical farms, right? And regardless of hurricanes or storms or anything, in Bahamas we have, I don't know what percentage of the year is sunshine, but got to be over 80 or 90% of the day is sunshine, right? So just getting, I think we've mastered water conservation with all the reservoirs and stuff, right? And importing fresh water from Andros and places like that, or desalination plants. But it's all possible now. There's no excuses really. We're in the age where technology and knowledge is available. So I mean, it's so big that we really don't have an excuse, right? I was training the other day in Cartagena. There's a fella here that he's the world champion surfer, but he has one arm, no legs, right?
Wow.
What one arm, the other arm is yellow fever. He had issues when he was a child yet, so they had to amputate everything. But he became a world champion surfer since the age of 13. He's 27 now, right? His name is Freddie. You should look him up. And he is still, going after U.S. Open championships and all that stuff. All of that is mindset. Has nothing to do with, skills or anything like that, right? And we have them in, the Paralympics, in Bahamas. All those athletes are amazing. It's all mindset. Imagine all the stuff they have to overcome, right? We, as able-bodied people, we have some very poor excuses, and we need to look in the mirror and do some what I call mirror work, right? You look in the mirror and you tell yourself, right, what do you need to do? When you start doing mirror work, that's a very powerful tool to get you from where you are to the next step. It might not be the ultimate step, might not be the step where you're celebrating your goal, but you do start doing mirror work every night before you go to sleep, when the conscious mind is closing down and the subconscious mind is opening up and allowing everything in without any distractions. That's when you do all that mindset work.
Awesome.
So it's all about timing.
Awesome. So, we mirror work, God says excellent, yes. So we looked at this whole process, and if we implement these apps and be able to streamline our supply chain with our foods for this 90% that we eat now, to me, that should be able to cause us to fight back and say, well, you're bringing us in these old food that we are proof on, so don't bring it in. And so when they can't, then more and more people should develop the habit of wanting to do their own internal farming. Or even if you don't do it yourself, more people will get into that industry and we should become more sustainable. And you go back to the days when we used to get full off of just eating from the trees in the yard, whether it's juju, mango, almond, whatever it was. We didn't go down the street to no dirties or any of those fast food places that existed. We ate from those trees and nobody got sick. My grandmother lived to 90-something years of age too. And I think she was sick once in her life and she had cataracts the other time. So,
Yep.
we need to just get back to that.
I think that accountability, now that we have these, all the social media that's available, companies have to become more transparent, right, as to what they're producing, what they're giving out, and yes, we have a voice now. It's like never before, right? 30 years ago, 20 years ago, we couldn't say what we wanted to say without being shut down.
Right.
Right. Now we can put some pressure back, as you said, on these food companies, and it's not like they can't do anything about it. I think it's
a habit.
It's all possible.
Yeah, it's a habit for them. They just nobody's challenging them, so they
Exactly.
continue to do the habit that they had all along, not worry about it. Yeah.
Exactly. If they're not being challenged, they're gonna just keep getting away with what they've been getting away with. But maybe they're not even aware of it. Maybe they are. It doesn't matter. But now we have a chance to fight back.
Awesome. Well, Maxim, it's really been a pleasure to have this conversation with you, and hopefully for our audience out there, there's been some value to everybody. Health is wealth, yes, for sure. And Nelson, Dominic, what we wish to happen is that we will all create critical mass in these type of environments, the things that we talk about, because we like to talk about things that are not normal, that people are not normally talking about, so that we could expand our mindset and our wealth of knowledge, so that we could have opportunities and creators. You created these apps along with your other team members, etc., and you're still doing great things, and you're still traveling in different places. Are you going to stay in Colombia, or are you going to another place again soon?
I've been here for 13 years now, so I'm pretty. I like it. It's not in the hurricane belt. It's not in the earthquake zone. So, I lived in California, man. I felt some 5.5 earthquakes, and they were not fun. Waking up in the morning and watching the roof do this kind of thing. I was like, you know what? I'm out of here.
You think you still have to go from the night before? Yeah. Awesome.
But yeah, no, I'll definitely keep working at we're still in the development stage. There's still a lot of work to be done, but we anyone who's interested in helping out or being part of the program, get in touch with myself or Dale, and we can make a big change. I honestly and truly believe that these apps and this platform can put food hunger to the test. But I think we can eliminate food hunger. I forget who it was. I think it was Roosevelt that started the first food stamp program in the States to eliminate hunger, and all these years later, we're still trying to figure out a solution. But I honestly think we could make a big dent, if not eliminate food hunger, with having the full view, right, the whole cycle in front of us, so we could address everything.
Yeah, and part of that is raising the quality of what is delivered to our table, which
exactly. Yep.
So awesome. So thank you again. Thank you everybody out there on social media. Carla, Jasmine, Tina, all of you who commented, etc. Nelson, Madam Producer, we're right here. Next week we'll be back with another topic to try and stretch our minds and create opportunities for us to think about that we could get into that isn't a part of the normal routine, because we got to build this new built environment and go forward from strength to strength. So thank you all.
Thanks, Dale.
You're welcome. Namaste. Bye.
Enjoyed the show? Then subscribe to us for more educational and inspirational content. Ring the bell so you never miss a show. Let's change the narrative 242.